a major shift in the landscape of TV news. Paramount Skydance announcing that they've made Bari Weiss editor-in-chief of CBS News and acquired her online news and commentary organization, The Free Press. Weiss, who attended Columbia University, is a Pittsburgh native who now lives in New York. The Wall Street Journal writing she's known for her outspoken support of Israel and strong takes on polarizing topics, including gun rights, diversity, and inclusion programs, American higher education, and President Trump. She's a registered independent who at one point called herself politically homeless, unrepresented by the two main U.S. parties. Joining me tonight to break this down and what this appointment means is Oliver Darcy. He's a media reporter and author of the Status newsletter, and GOP strategist Matt Gorman. We thank you both for being here. Oliver, this is your bread and butter. I'm going to start with you, right? Bari Weiss has very little experience in broadcast TV. She's now working with CBS News President Tom Zebrowski, who I do want to say I've worked with in the past and who is a great news manager. He has a long pedigree in broadcast news. Who's actually going to be calling the shots here?
I think that remains to be seen, but Bari Weiss is taking a very prominent editorial role. She's going to be editor-in-chief, which suggests that all of the editorial will ultimately report to her. And I think if you're a CBS News journalist, you are at the very least anxious today, given what Bari Weiss stands for. I mean, she is someone, as you referred to there, as has taken a lot of polarizing views, to say the least. She's anti-woke, anti-DEI. She said today that the far left loathes America, which is quite the statement for someone who's editor-in-chief of CBS News to make. And so the question remains to be seen, how involved is she going to be? Is she going to be at 60 Minutes going over the editorial on a weekly basis, or is she going to be leading from further away? And we don't know that, and CBS News journalists still don't know that, and I think that's causing, at the very least, some unease tonight.
Yeah, you know, Matt, I want to ask you, I mean, you're somebody who you appear on nearly every broadcast network that I know of. You appear on cable as well. You're somebody who's well-versed in this industry as well. You're also somebody who works for the right. What is your take on all this?
A couple things. First of all, they needed to shake things up at CBS, right? They've been perennially in third place for much of their trademark newscast, whether it's evening news or the morning show, for a long time. They've also had a lot of churn before Tom, as you mentioned, at the top of their news division, as well as their anchor desks on several other programs. So they needed to do something differently, I think, to bring some advertising revenue in and bring some buzz in, candidly. And look, I don't know Bari, but she's built a successful project after the Free Press after leaving the New York Times opinion page. I think the other thing is to look, there's been a thaw among CBS News and Republicans, right? And look, no good news organization can function if they don't have the trust, let's be honest, of both major political parties who are willing to talk on their air. I think this could help provide a reset for my party and CBS News as well.
Oliver, is this an attempt by CBS News and their new owners, maybe in their view, I'm not saying this is my view or the view of the people that watch, the millions that watch CBS News every night, to make CBS News more down the middle, or do you think this is a conscious move to the right?
I think either way you look at that, whether they're saying it's to be, down the middle and more fair, or it's, to the right, I think it's the same effect, which is to be more sympathetic to conservatism, or to, I wouldn't even call it conservatism, to the MAGA movement. And
why do you say that? There is a difference there. Why do you say that, Oliver?
Yeah, I mean, I think traditionally conservatives would stand at odds with a number of things that Donald Trump promotes. For instance, free trade. Traditionally, conservatives have been very pro-free trade. This president is very isolationist. And then there are a number of issues that this president has really, re-engineer the Republican Party to be in favor of that, 10 years ago, conservatives would have been against. For instance, conservatives were the ones that got us into the Iraq War, and this president says he's against it and anti-interventionalist. So there are two separate movements there. But I think that Bari is certainly going to be pushing a number of things that people on the right like. She's not necessarily a MAGA media personality, but people in that movement like that she's anti-DEI, anti-woke, very pro-Israel. And while she does criticize the president at some times, I think if you were to read the Free Press, those issues that I just outlined would be what you would take away as the great threat to American civilization or Western civilization, not the creeping autocracy that we're seeing from this president as he assaults things like free speech, the rule of law, et cetera.
Matt, I'm going to let you weigh in on that.
Yeah, look, I think if you're reading Donald Trump into a media merger, I think it's a little bit too much into this. Look, what I'm very interested in, candidly, is, look, there's been rumors that Skydance, who now owns CBS, might take a vested interest or try and buy CNN, right? So not only would they control CBS, they would control a major news network that, let's be honest, CNN is not, often hospitable to, the right. And so we will see if that happens. And again, I think necessary, whether we like it or not, 50% of this country voted for Donald Trump. And I think having a little bit more ideological diversity in many newsrooms across the country is not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
Ensuring that we have objective journalism.
I got one for each of you. Matt, I'm going to ask you, if someone is watching Fox News and CBS does move to the right in some capacity, does a Fox News viewer, a loyal Fox News viewer, do they go and watch CBS News? Do you think that actually happens?
I think the Fox News viewer and the cable news viewer in general, I think, is very different than someone who casually watches broadcast news. I think they're quite different. Cable news, wherever you are, they're far more habitual watchers. They tend to leave it on all day.
So, Oliver, my last question to you. We don't know how this is going to play out, right? But how do you think they will measure success over there at that company now? Is it ratings? Is it how their CEO, David Ellison, feels? What's their metric?
I'm not really actually sure what their metric is. I mean, I guess you could say ratings might be part of it. I think that the idea, though, I mean, David Ellison talked about this today. He said that he wants CBS News to speak to all of America. Every news organization wants to speak to all of America. They're not trying to speak to half of the country. They want to appeal to as many people as possible. They want to be trusted by as many people as possible. The issue right now is that when you have a president who lies, who shatters norms, and when you cover that from a factual basis, when you just fact-check this president and his administration, that alienates his audience. And he's a very thin-skinned man, as we know, and he attacks the news organizations. And so, I think CNN is perfectly hospitable to having fact-based conservatives come on the air. I don't think, actually, I guess they are to some extent hospitable with dishonest MAGA personalities. They have them on the air too these days. But I think the issue really is that when you have someone going on the air and misleading an audience, news networks typically are not hospitable to that, regardless of political party. It happens a lot more from one political party right now. And the question is, how do you appeal to the entire country when you have a political party that is, frankly, peddling a lot of lies, a lot of dishonesty to the American people? That is the question for CBS News. And frankly, it's a question for all news networks in this very polarizing age.
Yeah, and we're going to leave it there. A lot of great journalists work at CBS News. I have a lot of good friends that work there, and we, of course, wish the best for them. Oliver and Matt, very smart conversation. I thank you for being here tonight. We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.